Hi, friends. Welcome to the M365 or O365 Pulse. It is me, Tom, and Tamara today here joining you to go over the updated roadmap items. This is the essentially first week of April that we are joining you guys in. Jen is actually at SharePoint conference enjoying and mingling and socializing and doing Jen things. I'm sure she'll be joining us next week, and hopefully when we look at the roadmap, we'll have a whole bunch of new fun items we can talk about next week as well too. But hopefully at this point, you guys kind of know the drill and know the format that we go through. Tommy and Tamara will be talking about all the updates that have happened over the last week to the roadmap for Microsoft 365. They typically fall into four categories. In development is the first category, and the first part of how stuff enters in the roadmap. That means it's been announced that it's formally a feature and they're going through and working on it. From in development, it moves to rolling out. Rolling out means it's somewhere in the process of rolling out. This could be everything from public preview to first release to 90% of people have it, but it just quite hasn't made it out to all the tenants. But somewhere in the rolling out process. And finally, it goes out to the stage of launched, which means every cloud that it's been scoped to, because keep in mind that every feature is for every cloud, but every cloud and every segment that it's been scoped to, it should have been launched for. And then finally, every now and then we see some canceled items. But we tend to go through the roadmap in that same order, going in development, rolling out, and then launch. And so without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and let Tamara start us off with what she was excited to see as in development.
I'm excited to see modern meeting experience on the web for Microsoft Teams. It means the modern meeting and calling experience will be available for Teams on the web in Chrome and Edge browsers. Now, this is including an improved pre-join dynamic view and the updated control bar. So I'm excited to see that parity between the web and the desktop application. The only other one in development that really got me excited was OneNote. Dictate your notes in OneNote. I'm a little excited about this. So dictation with commanding available in both OneNote Web and Windows. And you can use speech to text instead of typing, and various commands such as delete to edit your notes. So I'm excited about that.
Yeah, I'll give a shout out too to the first one you mentioned, the idea of the modern experience coming into Teams for the web. If you guys are like us, if anyone has to experience this, if you work with customers that are in some version of government clouds and you are in commercial, that experience is not great going between them. So oftentimes when I am joining meetings that my customers have initiated, I'm actually doing it through the web because my Teams client, Azure Commercial, doesn't understand anything in Azure Gov. So the Azure Gov has no idea that I am Ochs at goplanet.com or go-planet.com. So it's just easier to join from the web in that case. But so because of that, when I'm going through and joining these meetings, oftentimes I definitely see that the experience in Teams for the web is not as good as Teams for the client. So happy to see that come along. Tom, what about you? What are you excited to see?
So she took one of the ones I was going to talk about, which I thought the OneNote one was cool. But a couple of the ones towards the bottom part of the list that I will mention is if you have a Microsoft list that you've used a calendar view on, there's now going to be an unscheduled items pane that you can access. And what that basically does is shows up on the right-hand side pane that you have there, and it's going to show all the items not yet appearing in the calendar view and they have missing dates. So if you have an entry there and there's a start date and an end date and whatever, a due date, if those are all part of the calendar view and those haven't been assigned, you're going to have a really nice, easy way to see, hey, here are the 5 items out there that really need to be updated to put dates in them. I think that's a really cool thing. Again, it's going to hit GCC worldwide, GCC high, and DoD, so everybody gets that love. There's a couple of Microsoft Stream items out there. And again, this is all the stuff for Microsoft Streams V2, which is the stuff that's actually being saved to SharePoint and OneDrive. But one of them is edit and view video or audio title. Yeah, try this again. View and edit video or audio title and descriptions. So basically, you can edit those things if you have the ability to edit a video out there. So viewers will be able to see this information along with non-editable fields like upload date, owner name, file name, and area path. One other thing that they have out there is changing the video or audio custom thumbnail. So this is similar to YouTube, where if you have a really dorky picture that they have sitting there and you're like, I don't want to sit there with my picture to begin, and I'm like, you can actually go pick one out, and then that becomes, you upload the image basically, and that becomes the thumbnail that they see when they're looking at a scan of all the videos that they have out there. So I think that's a really good thing. And again, that hits all the different clients: commercial, GCC, GCC high, and DoD.
So I have kind of a nerdy one that's going to take a little bit of an explanation, but it's something that I think is cool. So I've talked several times during these episodes about the idea of Windows 365. Most people probably understand what it is at this point, but it's the idea is it's a subscription service where you basically get a Windows machine that you can log in through a desktop, or log in through a browser rather. So it's a cool concept. I think it's something that's going to be super important in the future when we look at how clients are working and how companies are operating, rather than having to go out and necessarily buy laptops for everyone and stuff like that. Especially if you have specialized workflows, you can buy a subscription that's an online computer that people can log into and do everything they need. Right now, for the clients that are really wanting to heavily utilize that, since the Windows 365 program is still being developed, a lot of people also use virtual desktop environments. So VMware has been around for forever. Azure has their own with Azure Virtual Desktop or Azure VDI, and it's something you can go through and do. I actually see this fairly often in the space that Tamara and I specifically support. We have a decent amount of institutions that are doing what they call secure research, where it's organizations that need to go in and ensure that they are meeting the standards of CMMC and some of the Department of Defense regulations. And one of the easiest ways to do that is to spin up an Azure Virtual Desktop, because you can put a lot more restrictions and control around that than you can do easily on people's laptops if you're not completely controlling everything from the ground up. So you take a random university or a random company that's people that are doing normal work and then also have to do the secretive Department of Defense work. One of the ways you can really control it is, cool, I'll just give them a virtual desktop environment, put all the controls I want there, and then I know it's locked down and protected. Well, right now, if you have a virtual desktop environment and you wanted to start exploring what's going on with Windows 365, if you were trying to do conditional access policies, which I can tell you, most people that are going to be consuming either of those services, Windows 365 or Azure VDI, will most definitely be doing conditional access policies because they'll want to do stuff like multi-factor authentication and things like that. Right now, the same conditional access app that you choose applies to both of them. So you go in there and you say, okay, I want to do a conditional access policy and I want to cover what I'm doing with virtual desktops. And whether it's Windows 365 or Azure Virtual Desktop, it applies to both of them. Well, what happens if you're wanting to go through and do your research and you have something where you're currently using VDIs, but you're trying to develop a program for Windows 365 and you don't want the same conditional access policies applying to one that apply to the other? Well, prior to this, you'd basically be up a creek without a paddle. Microsoft has recognized that this is going to be an area of growth, that there's a good chance people that are consuming Azure VDI will be viable customers for Windows 365 as well. So actually added into the in development section separate applications for them inside of conditional access policies. So you'll be able to eventually actually dictate, are you talking about Azure Virtual Desktops or are you talking about Windows 365? And you could still theoretically do both of them by just including both the apps, but you'll importantly be able to not do both of them if you don't want to. And that's something that you can't do today, and it's going to be a good development moving forward. But we're super nerdy, so I kind of had to explain it.
Very cool.
All right, moving on from there, Tom, why don't you go ahead and kick us off with rolling out?
Sure. A couple things. One is on OneDrive. You can now organize or basically move around any of your add to OneDrive folder shortcuts anywhere you want them. They used to be kind of restricted to one little area of OneDrive. Well, now you can stick them in, regular private folders or anything else. So you've got a lot more flexibility for stuff that may make sense to be in a different folder, not just in this generic, hey, look, you've got all these shortcuts over here. So that's a good thing, I believe. And that should be getting close to being for everybody because it was due for March. The other thing I just want to mention, and I believe that we talked about this last week, and Adam tried to get a fight going here. But Microsoft Teams auto expiration of meeting recordings stored on OneDrive and SharePoint. That actually hit our tenant this week, and we are in the camp that says, nope, want to turn this sucker off. So all of a sudden on Tuesday, we start seeing this little yellow message underneath the recording going, this will be this will be deleted on date X. Click here to change that. Click here to learn more. And so we kind of covered it in a general Ask Me Anything session for Teams and said, you're going to see this from the last 2 days through this morning at 6 a.m., but then you shouldn't see it at all. But if you do see it, here's what you need to do to fix that. So that is probably getting close to being out to everybody's tenant because it's got a March date on it too. But again, if all of a sudden you start seeing a little weird message underneath your recording saying, hey, this is going to get deleted on this date, you're going to have to look at your team's meeting policies and go through and make adjustments to either make your date longer if you want it to be like 120 days as opposed to 60, or if you just want to say, turn this sucker off, I don't want to see it at all. So
cool.
Great.
Tamara?
Well, I'm looking at a couple. Microsoft Teams Connect. So with Microsoft Teams Connect, Microsoft is making it easier to collaborate with anyone outside of your organization. So you can use Teams' full suite of collaboration capabilities with external partners in other Azure AD orgs, the same way that you use them with colleagues from your organization. So shared channels enable people from different orgs to work together as one team in a shared space for a more structured, deeper, long-term collaboration. This sounds like a romance novel.
Yeah, this is such a good update though, because I love Teams. So in general, so I go and speak at conferences. I like 365. It's what I do for a career. I'm nerdy. I get excited about it. When Teams came out, I was super stoked. I'm going to say something that's sacrilegious to certain people on this call. I'm not a huge SharePoint guy necessarily by trade.
Okay, I'm out. That's it.
That's what I'm saying. So
boom.
SharePoint back in the day for me was something that my original exposure to SharePoint was in 2007, where they tried to force you to do everything in SharePoint, even the stuff that wasn't great. And so SharePoint always kind of had a sour taste in my mouth. I started out my life as an Exchange admin, and SharePoint was a tool that was out there for collaboration. And so especially when I got pretty deep into 365 and started that becoming my main mechanism, the main thing I did for work, SharePoint was always a file solution that I know some people got a ton of value, and you went in and looked at what some people did with team sites and everything, but that was never really core to what I did. So I was super excited when Teams came out, because Teams was a mechanism that allowed me to take advantage of some of that SharePoint functionality without having to have a fully developed intranet site and stuff like that, like a lot of the orgs I worked with didn't. But my biggest complaint since it launched has always been that the experience of collaborating in other teams kind of sucked. The fact that you had to log out of your team network and log into another tenant's team in order to go in and take advantage of it. Like, I can tell you, I work with a ton of partners. I have about 20 teams listed that I can go through and log into, and I basically don't use it because it's too disruptive of my workflow. If I leave my company's team and go in and look at another team and then forget to come back, like, who knows how many messages I've missed at that point and stuff. And so I was really disappointed with how collaboration across tenants worked in Teams. As much as I love Teams as an application, this is the answer. Being able to go through and collaborate with an external partner to where I can see that collaboration inside my company's team network without having to log out and log into another tenant is game changing. So I know this was talked about previously, I think when some of the meetings that I missed when I was super busy, like last month, but I'm absolutely stoked for this update. To me, this is literally game changing with how I actually consume and operate inside of Teams when we're talking about collaboration with that external partners, which, like, let's be real, I work for a IT services company. Like, that's what my job is collaborating with outside people. So absolutely stoked for that feature. I cannot wait for it.
Cool. Fabulous. And then just two other real short things. Microsoft Teams automated webinar invite. So when webinars are set up and scheduled, the webinar invite is now automatically added to the attendee's calendar, which is great. It removes another click. People don't have to add them manually. I think that's actually going to help increase attendance to your webinars. And then also domain customization for the webinar communication. So you can showcase your organization's brand in webinar communications. Whether webinar emails are sent to attendees, both the sender name and the email domain will now reflect the tenant name, making it easier for attendees to recognize, especially with a big push to identify phishing scams. I think this is going to be really helpful because people aren't going to think it's an unsolicited thing, even though it might be unsolicited, but still.
True.
What you got?
Anything else for you, Tom?
I'll go ahead and toss one more out for forms. Direct share forms to people in your organization get email notifications. So you're going to have the ability to say, hey, I've got this form that I want some people to fill out. Here are the people individually who I want to have fill that out. And I'm going to get form status updates by periodic email notification. I think that's really good for people who are like, hey, I've got 10 people who I'm trying to get feedback from. 3 people have done it, 7 people haven't. I need to get that periodic email notification and nag them on a regular basis. So I think this is a good change along those lines.
I have 2 really quick ones. Obviously, the one I was passionate about was one Tamara did, which is why I waxed and waned on it for like 2 minutes. But one, just because it's funny and we can't not mention it, dark mode for Yammer has moved to rolling out. We like it anytime we see dark modes. I legit use dark modes for all my stuff, but I also still giggle every time I see a dark mode on there. And then the other one that I thought was worth mentioning, which again, this is of no use to me, but I have friends that will love this. You can now, or you'll be able to soon, customize your add to OneDrive link. So you have a button where you can go through and there's a button to just on a file, add to OneDrive that puts the file in your OneDrive. For me, that's great. Throws it up into the cloud, I'm good to go. For someone who's super organized, like typically I'm thinking of PMs that like micromanages the junk out of their folders and where stuff is, that's a nightmare because it just generically throws it in your OneDrive and you have to remember to go and organize it later and stuff like that. So I've literally had PMs complain to me about that feature. Well, you'll now actually be able to customize it. So your add to OneDrive folder button, or add to OneDrive button, you can actually target subfolders with. So if you wanted to create a section where it goes, so it's not just generically going in your OneDrive and have it specifically for certain subfolders, or maybe a subfolder of like needs to be organized or whatever it is, you'll be able to do that. And again, the people that hyper manage their folder structure, I'm sure will be happy to see this come. So with that said, we'll go ahead and move on to Launched. And Tamara, you can start us off again.
Sure. I've got one thing. Forms integration with Microsoft Booking. So associate form templates to the booking services to send forms for data intake from attendees prior to joining a booking appointment. I think this is going to be great, especially if you have required information that you have to gather. Like if you're doing this, if you're using bookings for doing like an appointment with a psychiatrist. There's some intake questions for that. And I think it's going to make it a lot easier.
Yeah, the 2 use cases I've had customers use with bookings, one of which was a higher education university that used it to essentially schedule like RA time, where like if you wanted to go through and talk with someone about a class. So I could 100% see like, what are you wanting to talk about? I could see forms being associated with that when people schedule the things really making sense. The other one was the state that we worked with that internally they wanted to use it for some of their customers, of where they would be supporting other end users that were employees of the state. But similarly, it was like you were requesting time from their IT staff for help with a problem. And so same thing, I could see them having a form of like, oh, what's the area of technology that you need help with? Can you describe your problem? Any type of prep we can give that will just make it easier for the people that are going to those bookings appointments to make sure that the appropriate resources are there, that they've done any research they need to do as well. So kind of surprising this wasn't a feature before, but great to see. Tom?
Well, Tamara had absolutely one more item than I did because I got nothing. So it's all yours, Adam.
I don't really have anything that's super rocking the boat either, so we'll actually go ahead and end there. So everyone, thank you for joining us for the Office 365 or Microsoft 365 Pulse, whichever one you want to call it. We go both ways. Outside of that, we hope everyone has a wonderful, wonderful week. We will be back next week as always, hopefully with Jen and hopefully with a whole bunch of new exciting SharePoint updates.
Sounds like a plan. Have a good one, everybody.
Bye, guys.